It often begins with love, or at least what feels like it. You see someone hurting, struggling, falling apart, and something inside you lights up, not out of pity, but out of purpose. You tell yourself you just want to help, to make things better, to ease their pain. But somewhere between helping and healing, you begin to forget the difference between their wounds and yours. You start carrying emotions that don't belong to you. You start feeling responsible for someone else's chaos, as if their brokenness is your test to pass. People call it kindness, compassion, loyalty. But deep down, it feels heavier than that. It feels like duty, like survival. Because somewhere along the way, you learned that love and fixing were the same thing. It's not that you like broken people. It's that being needed feels like safety. When you're fixing someone, you can't be abandoned. When you're holding them together, they can't walk away. Not yet. You become the glue, the anchor, the quiet savior. And even though it exhausts you, there's comfort in that exhaustion, because at least you have a role, at least you matter. But what no one tells you is that this kind of saving slowly becomes a prison. Every rescue comes with a hidden cost. You lose a little bit of yourself each time. You begin to mistake emotional labor for love, control for care, anxiety for empathy. The truth is, people who can't stop fixing others aren't addicted to kindness. They're addicted to certainty, to the illusion that if they can fix everyone around them, maybe they can finally stop the chaos inside themselves. They learned early that calm never lasted, that love could fall apart at any moment. So they grew into adults who treat other people's pain like a puzzle to solve. But love was never meant to be a repair project. You can't rebuild someone's heart by breaking your own. At its core, the need to fix others isn't about control. It's about fear. Fear of helplessness. Fear of sitting in the discomfort of watching someone fall apart and realizing you can't stop it. For people who can't stop fixing, silence feels dangerous. Distance feels unbearable. They rush to patch every emotional crack, not because they want power, but because they can't stand uncertainty. Somewhere deep inside, they've equated peace with perfection and connection with repair. They've built an invisible belief that if everyone around them is okay, then maybe finally they'll be okay too. You see, the fixer rarely begins as a manipulator. They begin as a child who watched someone they loved crumble and had no choice but to grow up fast. Maybe it was a parent who never learned to manage their emotions. Maybe it was a home where love was unpredictable, warm one day, cold the next. That child learns to scan the room for tension, to anticipate explosions, to become the peacemaker. They learn that safety comes not from being cared for, but from caring, from managing, from saving. And once that pattern sets in, it becomes instinct. So in adulthood, fixing becomes the only language of love they know. They attract people who are chaotic, distant, emotionally unavailable. Not because they enjoy pain, but because brokenness feels familiar. They know how to survive it. They know how to find purpose in someone else's healing. And when that person starts to get better, the fixer doesn't always feel relief. They feel lost. Because who are they, if not the one who saves? That's the hidden cost of always being the healer. You forget that you deserve healing too. It's hard to admit that beneath the urge to help is a desperate longing. Not to be needed, but to be seen. To have someone finally look at you the way you look at everyone else, with gentleness, with patience, with care. But when your worth has always depended on what you do for others, rest feels wrong. Receiving feels selfish. And the idea of being loved without earning it, almost impossible. Psychologists call it codependency. But that word doesn't capture the tenderness behind it. The ache of a person who learned that love must always be earned. Codependency sounds clinical. The truth is far more human. It's the nervous system's way of saying, if I can keep everyone calm, maybe I'll finally feel safe. For chronic fixers, other people's emotions register as alarms in their own bodies. Someone else's sadness feels like a personal failure. Someone's anger feels like danger. And so they rush to repair, soothe, explain, over-communicate. Anything to make the discomfort stop. It's not manipulation. It's survival training that never turned off. Neuroscience explains part of it. When you grow up in an environment where love is inconsistent, your brain wires itself around hypervigilance. You begin reading micro-expressions, tone shifts, silence. Everything becomes data to predict rejection. This rewiring changes how you process connection. You start believing that love must be managed, that relationships are fragile things that will collapse if you aren't constantly tending them. So you overfunction. You apologize first. You anticipate everyone's needs. You take responsibility for emotions that were never yours to carry. And even when people tell you, you don't have to fix me, you don't quite believe them. Because once upon a time, fixing really did keep you safe. But that instinct has a shadow side. When you're always fixing, you never truly connect. You relate to others through their pain, not their presence. You confuse intensity with intimacy. You crave emotional depth, but only in crisis. Because calm feels unfamiliar, even threatening. And over time, this cycle breeds quiet resentment. You start feeling unseen, unappreciated, used. But how can anyone see you when you never stop performing the role of savior? What makes this pattern so hard to break is that it feels noble. Society rewards the helper, the empath, the selfless one. You're so caring, they say. You're always there for everyone. But they don't see the sleepless nights, the anxiety, the loneliness of being needed, but never truly known. Because fixing is not the same as loving, and helping is not the same as healing. There's a point where even the strongest fixer begins to crack. It usually doesn't happen in one big collapse, but in a quiet unraveling, a kind of soul exhaustion that no amount of helping can fix. You start noticing it in small ways. The heaviness that never quite leaves your chest. The way your mind keeps replaying other people's problems, long after the conversation is over. The way guilt whispers whenever you try to rest. You tell yourself you're just tired, that you'll slow down after they're okay. But after never comes. There's always another person to save, another fire to put out, another wound to bandage that isn't yours. And slowly, you begin to vanish under the weight of everyone else's healing. This is the moment where the fixer starts to face the truth, that beneath all the helping is a deeper wound, the fear of being unworthy without it. Because if you're not fixing someone, what are you doing? Who are you when there's no one to rescue? The silence that follows is terrifying because it forces you to sit with your own unmet needs, the very ones you've buried beneath everyone else's pain. But that silence is also the doorway to something sacred, your own restoration. Healing for the fixer doesn't begin with learning to love others less. It begins with learning to love yourself without a role to play. It's realizing that compassion doesn't require self-destruction, that empathy isn't measured by how much you sacrifice. You start to see that peace doesn't mean people won't struggle. It means you no longer confuse their suffering with your responsibility. There's guilt at first. Setting boundaries feels cruel. Saying no feels selfish. But slowly, you start to understand that boundaries aren't rejection. They're honesty. They protect not only you, but the sincerity of your care. Because love without limits isn't love. It's control wrapped in fear. The fixer must learn that stepping back is not abandonment. Sometimes it's the purest form of faith. Faith that people can find their own strength. Faith that healing doesn't always need your hands. And then, one day, something shifts. You stop reaching for every broken thing and realize not everything needs your hands to heal. You begin to see that love isn't always an act of repair. Sometimes it's a quiet witness. You sit beside someone's pain without rushing to rewrite it. You stop searching for your worth in other people's wounds. The need to fix softens into something gentler. Understanding. You start to trust that others are capable of finding their own light, just as you are learning to trust yours. For the first time in a long while, your body feels lighter. There's space where anxiety used to live. You can breathe without scanning for what's wrong. You no longer mistake stillness for danger. When someone cries, you don't drown, you listen. When someone pulls away, you don't chase, you wait. You begin to realize that your presence was never meant to be a rescue mission. It was meant to be a reflection of calm. The kind of peace that reminds others they are not broken, only becoming. And slowly, you discover something miraculous. The same compassion that once exhausted you now restores you. Because it's no longer born from fear, it's rooted in balance. You love because you want to, not because you have to. You help because it's kind, not because it's your purpose. You care without disappearing. And that's what true empathy looks like. Not saving people from their darkness, but walking with them until they find the light themselves. So if you're someone who can't stop fixing others, remember this: you were never meant to be anyone's savior. You were meant to be whole. You can't heal the world by breaking yourself, and you can't carry others home until you learn how to rest in your own. The moment you stop confusing love with labor, you begin to experience something deeper. Peace that doesn't depend on being needed. And in that peace, you'll find the thing you were searching for all along. The quiet truth that you were never broken for caring too much. You were just tired of carrying what was never yours to hold.